How are you? Welcome. I'm Glenn Mazzara. This is Amy Lagos. And we are from, oh, thank you. That's very nice. We're from the Inclusion and Equity Group. And so to explain a little bit about what that is, it's a board-appointed committee here at the Guild that has been around for a few years. And it was really, created to look at how does the Guild, kind of get more women, people of color, people over 50, writers with disabilities, LGBTQ plus. How do we, help get those people jobs? How do we prepare them for jobs? We found that a lot of people were really sort of saying, well, we can't find writers who do this or writers like that or whatever. So we initially started by creating a number of programs to educate our members. We started the Staff Writer Boot Camp. We give a presentation at the Showrunner Training Program. We have the Feature and TV Writers Access Project. And that's been great, and many of you have participated in that, and that's been fantastic. And then what we've been doing lately is kind of expanding that. We've partnered with other organizations, of which we're very happy to partner with the Geena Davis Institute. We did a panel with them several years ago, and that was at the theater, and that was really eye-opening, and I really find the work that that group does inspiring and important, and we're excited that you're all here to share in that. And I'll admit, it's really changed a lot about how I write and run my shows and all of that. And so not only are we partnering with these other institutes like that, but we've also really, in the past year, have changed the message of the Writers Guild and stopped, protecting, say, showrunners or bad behavior or certain things that we've considered the culture, and how do we change that culture, and how do we move forward as a guild. And so what we've been doing is really kind of, putting together a list of wants and demands and things that as we go ahead and negotiate with the agencies coming up and the MBA and put forward things that really help our writers and make sure that they're in safe spaces and make sure that they're knowledgeable and make sure that they are able to tell the stories that they want to tell and that all writers get an equal shot and the opportunity to do that. So that's the mission of the Inclusion and Equity Group, and I'm very proud to be a part of that. So thank you. But that's really, and so we would love for you to continue to come to programs like this and evenings like that and just really participate, because that really helps us, serve you better. So let's talk about this particular evening, and I'll turn that over to Amy.
Thank you. So tonight, the IEG, along with the Writers Guild, has partnered with the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media to bring you this panel that is really a part of a series of panels that we're going to be doing to really empower writers to change the narrative. Obviously, the IEG does a lot of work dealing with all manner of employment issues, dealing with inclusion and equity, but we also recognize how crucially important it is to be telling stories that reflect the diverse world that we all live in. So we've sort of created this series to kind of both empower and inspire writers to take control of that narrative and flip the script in whatever way they can, whether that's by including more female characters, more characters of color, more LGBTQ characters, characters with disabilities throughout our scripts, as well as creating storylines and backgrounds and occupations for these characters that kind of expand the scope of what we so often see represented in film and television. So that is really what this panel series is about. The hope is that we can give you some inspiration and hopefully some tips and tricks for kind of expanding your stories, telling new stories, giving writers the ability to kind of write the change they wish to see in the world. So we are so grateful to the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media for partnering with us tonight. And I am going to introduce to you their chair and founder, an Academy Award winning actress who really is known as much for her tireless efforts in promoting equality in gender issues, as she is for her incredible acting work. She is the co-founder and chair of the Bentonville Film Festival. She's the special envoy for women and girls in the UN International Telecommunications Union. She's an officer, an official partner of the UN Women, and the chair of the California Commission on the Status of Women. So please join me in welcoming Geena Davis.
Wowie, wow. I sound good, don't I? Wow. I'm impressed with myself. Thank you all. It's so wonderful to be here. I'm so happy to see all of you, and thank you for coming. We're very excited to be back here again at the WGA West. We're thrilled to have our new partner, my new fast friend, Lyda Hill, and her foundation here tonight. So as most of you are aware, we have been very dedicated to studying the careers of female characters on screen. And it's been an incredibly important part of our research. And we know that if we show female characters in unstereotyped activities, that girls and women are much more likely to pursue non-traditional careers later on. And it will expand what they believe is possible if they see it. Our motto is, if they see it, they can be it. And one fun example some of you may have heard about is about a year ago, I shoot archery, my archery coach called and said he was looking at the graphs of participation in competitive archery. And it was always men, boys, women, girls. And then suddenly in 2012, the line for the girls went straight up 105% and became the most populated category in archery. So what happened in 2012? Hunger Games and Brave, which was the animated movie of a female archer. So girls saw the movie and they left the theater and bought a bow. It was like absolutely an instant reaction. And it just shows, you know, that they said, a girl is doing something, that seems really cool. That means I can do it too. And it's absolutely the case. You know, there's something called the CSI effect to explain how so many more women have gone into the field of forensic science because of all the modeling they've had on TV. And so one of the most important career categories to us and to the world really is the STEM careers, given the digital and technological revolution that our society is going through. And this is why our partnership with Lyda Hill is so important and exciting. And today we're going to reveal the results to you of a very extensive STEM in media study that we did with her generous support and that of her foundation. And it includes a 10-year analysis of female STEM portrayals in film and television. And in addition to that, we surveyed middle, high school, and college age women and girls to uncover their perceptions of how STEM characters are portrayed in the STEM fields, and also to find out their view of STEM careers overall in the real world. And if that wasn't enough excitement, I'm extremely pleased to announce that Lyda Hill and her foundation have just committed to partnering with us for a year-long advocacy and outreach program, a campaign that will allow our institute to reach out to all of you in a very strong and profound way, to the entire entertainment and media community. We're going to be offering companies that you work at in-depth training and consulting. And we can also offer you customized GDIQ research. And for those of you who might not have heard yet about what GDIQ is, it's a new tool that we were able to develop at my institute because of funding, a very generous grant from Google. And what it does is allows us to use this new software to do our research for us. So before, where we'd have 60 grad students watching movies and pausing and making notes, now we can literally shove in the movie and get the instant results. And it uses artificial intelligence and the latest voice and face recognition technology to tell us everything that we could tell beforehand, but also things that you can't discern with the human eye, like to the millisecond, how much screen time and speaking time do the characters have? And guess what? it's awful also. Not only aren't there very many parts, they're not on screen and they don't talk either. So we have all that going for us. But it's fantastic, and we can let's say a studio wants to use this technology, they can do a benchmark report on everything they put out in the past 10 years, almost instantly. We can read scripts now. The tool can read scripts. So before you cast it or shoot it, you can get a detailed analysis of the gender representations. It can even tell you what kinds of words people use to describe the female characters, what kinds of words the female characters use. When we did a big study on advertising, we looked at thousands of commercials and found that female characters use far more one-syllable words than male characters. And the male characters are far more often using multi-syllable words and being portrayed as smart and important. So we have a lot of work to do. Anyway, we're incredibly grateful to Lyda. Thank you so much, and you and your foundation for your incredible, generous support and letting us reach new heights and giving us the opportunity to take it to the next level. So there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen tonight, and presentations and panels. So let's get to it. Thank you all very much.
Hi, I'm Madeline Nonno. I have the privilege of being the CEO for the Geena Davis Institute on Gender and Media. And without further ado, I'd love to bring our new partner, Nicole Small, who is the president of the Lyda Hill Foundation.
Hi. Well, we are so excited to be here tonight. Who wants to follow you, though? Definitely not me. But I'm going to do my best. So thank you all for having us. So we at the Lyda Hill Foundation, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do and like why in the world we're here. We have never been to an event like this before, and we now know what we've been missing out on. This is super fun. So thanks for having us tonight. So just to kind of get started, I'm sure you all lay awake at night wondering this, but have you ever laid awake wondering what the following things have in common? Hidden Figures, CSI, Bones, Goldie Blocks, Black Panther. Have you ever wondered what they all have in common? I know it keeps you guys up all night, doesn't it? Okay, well, they might have in common the following things. Some of them might have grossed hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office. Some of them have over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube. Some of them might have had their own Super Bowl commercial. Well, that's not the only thing they all have in common. It turns out that they all have women in STEM characters, either as leads or as really important characters in their movies and their TV shows and their YouTube channels. And it turns out that having women in those roles and having them maybe have more than one-syllable words can actually be good for viewership, and it can be really, really good for business. So you might wonder why we're here and why we care about these things. So we're here today because at the Lyda Hill Foundation, we love investing in big ideas that might change the game and make the world a better place. And today, the game that we're focused on is girls in science. So through Lyda's longstanding commitment to science and many women scientists, some of which you're going to hear from today, we've come to realize that we needed a new game plan to get girls excited about science. There are great programs out there doing great work, but what we know is that from a very early age, when our young girls are consuming media all the way through early adulthood, they're surrounded by content and one-syllable words that are delivering messages that are not always commensurate with our goal for each of them to go make a difference in the world. So we want them all to know that they can make our world a better place. So how do we make the world a better place? Science. You may ask, seriously, science? Do we care that much about science? So do me a favor before we start talking a little more about science. I need you guys to help me. So please stand if you or someone close to you either smelled the fires, experienced the fires, or saw any fires this summer or in the last couple of years. I know LA, there's been a lot of fires. Okay. Now, oh, well, I should know my audience. Most everyone's standing. Okay. Well, for those of you who are left, please stand if someone close to you or you have been affected by cancer. That usually gets the rest of the room, unfortunately. Okay, and for those of you who might still be standing or sitting, please stand if you have no clue how to use Snapchat or Visco, but you have a kid in your life that does and you want to know how to learn. Okay, perfect. Now, if you're holding a supercomputer in your hand that's about this big, go ahead and sit down. That's everybody, by the way. You all have a cell phone. So as you can see, if you thought you did not care about science, everybody in this room is affected by science, everybody. And we know that the world's biggest issues, whether they're personal or global, whether it's climate change or technology or cancer, we know that all of these issues are going to be solved by science. So if that's the case, we know that we need to bring every brain to the table to solve these problems, right? And what if every one of you in the room tonight could make a difference? Did any of you guys ever think maybe when you're growing up, maybe I want to cure cancer, or you've seen someone suffer with a disease and thought, I wish I could do something about that, but I'm not a doctor and it's a little bit too late. I don't have my PhD, because I don't have mine, by the way. But it turns out, ooh, we also may need to learn how to, okay, let there be light. So it turns out that everybody in this room can help. And a critical part of making this happen is to inspire our next generation to hope for a better future. They actually truly have to believe that they too can make the world a better place. But we also know that hope has never turned out to be a strategy. So investing in the thought leaders of today to inspire those who will come tomorrow, that is a strategy. We know that if you show a little girl what women in STEM are accomplishing today, then that little girl will believe that she too can be a force for positive change. After all, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So as Geena said, at the Lyda Hill Foundation, we know how important it is to have women represented in film and television. Showing diverse perspectives on the big and small screens inspires young girls and women to pursue diverse interests and passions in their real lives. And unfortunately, stories of women in STEM are not being told. And therefore, young girls are not seeing themselves in those jobs. This, however, there's a lot of problems in this world that we cannot fix. This is actually fixable. You all can start tonight, in case you were wondering why you were here. We have a job for you. We know that the lack of storytelling is not due to the lack of stories to be told, but we just need to tell them more often. There are a tremendous number of women in the field every day, women who are at the front lines of scientific breakthroughs and innovation, and we want to be sure everybody, especially young girls, know about these women and their stories. In a few minutes, you're going to meet Jess Cramp, an incredible shark researcher and National Geographic scientist who has an amazing story to tell. And someone said to me earlier, does she look like an explorer? And I'm like, well, what does an explorer look like? It looks like Jess and a lot of other women we're going to introduce you to. So we are excited to support her in her work, and we're excited for you to meet her tonight. Just this summer, in fact, we at the Lyda Hill Foundation announced another $1 million grant to the National Geographic Society to support more women scientists like Jess and help them tell their stories. So we know that by supporting the creation of more and better portrayals of women doing super cool science and tech things in the media, we can make a real impact on the way girls view their futures. For that reason, we are grateful that there are so many talented content creators in the room here with us tonight, and that you all can make such an impact through your craft. Every person in here tonight, everyone, I'm going to make eye contact with every one of you, has an opportunity to shift our current culture and create lasting change through the stories that you all choose to tell and how you choose to tell them. You have the power to tell the stories about women in STEM. You can add a woman in STEM into the script you're writing. And it doesn't have to be the main idea of a show. Just this past Sunday night, I was laying in bed watching a football game and then watched Madam Secretary. And it turns out there was a very critical moment in that show that involved a surgeon. And so it wasn't the main, Madam Secretary, as you know, isn't a science show, right? It's a political show. But there was a very important moment in the show whether we were going to find out if someone was going to live or die, and they were waiting for the surgeon to come through the door. And I'm pretty sure people thought that surgeon was going to look a certain way. But it turns out when the surgeon walked through the door, it was a young African-American woman who had just made one of the most important decisions in the show of the evening. It was probably 10 seconds. She had 3 lines, and it probably changed 3 million people's view of what a surgeon should look like. It's that easy. That one creator who said, maybe we should make the surgeon look like this, may have changed lives forever. We will never know. So we hope that you all tonight will listen and will consider doing that as well with us. So we're going to talk in a minute about a research study, but we know that a research study alone isn't enough to make change by itself. So we're making an exciting announcement tonight as well. We envision a future in which more women innovators are empowered to solve our greatest global challenges, which is why we are launching the If Then initiative. If Then seeks to further women in science, technology, engineering, and math through empowering current innovators and inspiring the next generation of pioneers. Keep your eyes open in the coming months for many more exciting announcements about If Then. So to close, in a world filled with uncertainty, this research study and this evening represent hope. Hope that we'll be able to make the world a better place. Hope that our young people will be inspired to make change. And hope that we might actually leave this earth we are borrowing from our children in a better place than we found it. But we know this hope doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come without visionary, committed leaders like all of you for being here today. So thank you. So speaking of visionary, I wanted to take a minute to invite Geena back to the stage and introduce you all to Lyda Hill, the namesake of our foundation and a visionary leader. Lyda invests in game-changing advances in nature and science, which have led to numerous investments in many women in STEM over the years. If you've met Lyda before, you know she's a force for good, and if you haven't, we wanted you to have an opportunity to meet her this evening. So why don't you all join me on the stage? So now for the really fun part.
No.
So Lyda, we're going to start for a minute. I just want everyone here to hear a little bit about your story and tell us why you care about science. What got you interested in it?
Well, it's really cool. I always thought it was really neat. I liked math and science my whole life, and I have to confess that my mother was very smart, and she gave me one of those little chemistry kits. Yeah, I did have a bad experience in the bathroom. I kind of blew things up. But it was a lot of fun, and it inspired me to want to continue to do that. And so I've always found science interesting. It doesn't matter what you're doing. It does such interesting things. And I guess I couldn't have been too young, and they wouldn't have let me look at the magazines. But I love reading National Geographic because you can see people going and discovering things and finding stuff. And that was really cool. Anything that could take me out to where I could find something new or could do something different. And then when I had my first mastectomy 37 years ago, I really got into supporting women, into supporting medical science, because that seemed like a really good idea. Very personal, but a really good idea. And so I have invested a great deal in science, in medical science especially, since I have a motivation. But I've always enjoyed what you can learn, and what has surprised me is how fast now things are being discovered. I mean, what you were describing that you can now do, you don't have to watch the TVs to do it. Oh my gosh. I mean, things are happening so fast. We need so many more people who are looking into and are inspired to find these things. And if you look at fortunately, I've had an opportunity to travel a lot, and if you look at the news, you see people very hungry in many places around the world. And fortunately, there are scientists that are working on growing and on better seeds so that they can grow in better places. And I've funded some scientists who were working on ways to find out where they were able to set up cell phones and find out where things are going wrong and where they're getting rain, so that they could then tell the Gates Foundation where to send the mosquito nets to put over the kids. They said, don't send it to this village. No, they need to go down to this part of the country in Africa first, because they had more rain, and so they'll have more mosquitoes. I mean, there's something every day out there that all of us, if we knew enough, we could inspire someone to help. I'm a little late, but so I'm doing my bit this way.
And we're so glad you are. So, Geena, it was almost a year ago. I think you were in Dallas, and we heard you speak on this work for the first time. And we were just so incredibly inspired. I think I called the office and called Matt in 2 seconds and said, we need to know them. They're doing incredible work, and we're really passionate about women in science. And we know that we need to do this culture shift. And we know it's not going to happen the usual way. And you'll figure out tonight with Lyda, we don't do things the usual way. So we were so inspired, and you all were so kind to agree to help allow us to fund a study to think about STEM portrayals in women in the media. Tell us why that was important to you, and you guys were excited to do this work.
Yeah, I from the beginning, this whole started for me when my daughter was a toddler, and I sat down with her to introduce her to little kids' TV shows, and from the first second I was watching, I realized, wait a minute, where are all the female characters? This is something made for 2-year-olds. How is there far more male characters than female characters? What are we doing? We're training kids from the beginning to have unconscious gender bias because we're saying, well, the girls aren't as important. There aren't as many of them to little kids. So that's what started everything for me. And then through meeting so many creators in Hollywood and talking to them about this problem, finding out that there was such a lack of awareness about this, that everybody I talked to in the industry said, that's not true anymore. That's already been fixed. And I was like, I don't think so. So that's what started all of this. I wanted the data and have used the data to go directly to the creators and say, I'm sure you were unaware. And the fact is they were unaware. It was completely unconscious bias on their part as well. The universal reaction whenever we give a presentation is that they're horrified. They had no idea they were leaving out that many female characters. So the data, speaking of science, the data does almost all of the work for us. You can't argue with facts. So well,
How have things changed?
you shouldn't, right? So a big part of this is having kids see girls doing interesting and important things equally, in numbers to boys doing interesting and important things. And so that's why their occupations and what they do and what they're interested in and involved in is so incredibly important, because then it becomes normal. Oh, girls, like I said, girls can do that. Okay, then I can do that. And boys see, oh, good, of course, girls always can do that. And one of the most important areas that I've always felt is in the STEM careers, that's where we can really make the most progress. It's where we need the most brain power to come into the picture. We need all hands on deck, and we're leaving out virtually half the population if we don't encourage girls to do that.
I mean, I'm sure you guys have all seen the work where you ask kids to draw a scientist, and 90% of them draw someone that looks like Albert Einstein, and he was brilliant, so that's not so bad. However, most of them don't draw women. And not to mention, on top of that, we are asking little girls all the time to describe to us what a lab looks like, right? And there's also this very stereotypical view of, and there are lots of labs that look like this, right? But when you hear Jess talk tonight and she tells you what her lab looks like, you will never again think about science in a lab the same way, right? So Lyda, you funded Jess and you funded a lot of other women scientists to do amazing work in their labs. Tell us about some of the other women you funded and what their labs look like.
Oh yeah, that's one of the neat things, is getting to go check out and make sure they're in interesting labs. Sarah Parchak and I went up to visit her in Newfoundland, where she was looking for Viking settlements. Sarah Parchak is she's an Egyptologist, she's an archaeologist, and she figured out how to use satellites to look at the ground and look for archaeology. And lo and behold, she is so good at it now that it's become a whole field. And she has found several settlements that were unknown in Israel, and I think a couple of them in Israel, and she's found a whole lot more. No, I can't say that. I'm not supposed to tell that. Let's see. She's found a lot of neat stuff, and and being out there in the field with her and seeing the way they dig holes to find things. That's kind of part of my thrill about the whole thing, is to get to see some of that in action. And when I was over in Africa with Lee Berger and got to meet the underground astronauts in the Rising Star Cave in South Africa, that was so much fun. I mean, they were little bitty girls. And one of them now works in Dallas at the Perot Museum. And we got Becca with us. And science is just fun. But it also is important, because what is going on in the world, we need a lot of people who are addressing some very important issues. And those important issues run the gamut. But we need as Geena's already said, we need the whole population working on this, not just a few, and more things that we need in the future, whether it's learning how to make the materials for sports equipment. Hey, that actually is a STEM activity. That's not just a designer activity. Now they've got those swimsuits that make you go faster or something. Where were those when I needed them? But there's so many things that we need in this planet to help the planet and to help all of us. And if we could get more people headed that direction, that would be really helpful.
And that's one of the things that you guys walk away tonight. If you think about the work that you do and the stories you tell, you'd be surprised if you spent a couple of minutes thinking about how science and tech are involved in what you do, because it's really everywhere and sometimes in the most unexpected places, whether it's shoe design or whether it's sports equipment, it's everywhere. And that's part of the story that we want to tell. So Geena, just to help us wrap up, what's the call to action for tonight for everyone here?
Well, you actually were very eloquent in your talk about the call to action. The call to action is to always do a gender pass when you're writing, to really put some thought into how are the female characters portrayed. How can we get more of them? Can this character be female? Why is this character male? Couldn't it be female? Could it be an intersectional female? And to give the characters interesting and important things to do, and not just be set dressing or decorative, but actually have substance and meaning, and let the female characters help drive the plot. Give them, meaty, important things to do, and then cast me. That's the other important part. I'll be writing something for me. Good thing I thought of saying that.
Well, I have 2 little girls, and I'm okay with you being casted as their role model. We would be psyched. So with that, I think we're going to jump into the panel and hear from some of these amazing women doing some amazing things.
So I think what we're going to do is now bring up our esteemed researcher, Dr. Carolyn Heldman, who's going to present our research. Do we need a...
It's data time. Don't fall asleep on me, people. We're going to be looking at some numbers. We're going to take exactly 10 minutes, 2 minutes on each of these. See, you're already into the numbers. 2 times 5. We're going to look at previous research, the methodology for our 2 studies, one big study, and then look at our findings in terms of how STEM characters are portrayed, because we analyze media content, and then what do girls and women think about STEM, and lastly, provide some recommendations. So jumping right into it. If you think about why girls and women aren't in STEM, an apt metaphor is to think about losing them at every joint in a leaky pipeline. So we lose girls in STEM because boys and girls are not encouraged to engage in STEM the same way from their parents, from educators. So for example, boys get encouragement to engage in STEM regardless of whether or not they've expressed interest in it, whereas girls only get interest from their parents if they express interest in it. Another study finds that when parents go to science museums, that they explain concepts to boys at 3 times the rate that they explain them to girls. I could go on and on, but you get the sense of what happens at this particular joint in the leaky pipeline. And then during the high school years, we also see a big drop-off. So we don't see it with young men, but we do see it with young women. Young men, about 40%, just under 40% are interested in STEM when they enter high school, and about 40% are interested when they're done with high school. For girls, they start much lower, around 16%, and then that interest declines actually over the 4 years of high school down to about 13%. In college, we see this gap grow even wider, with 6.7 million men majoring in STEM compared to 2.5 million women. And then when men and women get into the STEM profession, not all women work. Even if they have a STEM degree, they're less likely to work in a STEM profession than men. They face a lot of challenges in the workplace, which we will talk about. So why? What are the root causes for these, the leaky joints in this pipeline? First is stereotypes, and I'll just read this because it's such a succinct quote, that parents, teachers, toys, social norms, and media representations reinforce the stereotype that STEM is for men. And what we know is that girls and boys think that STEM is for men, that men and women think that STEM is primarily for men, and that scientists, folks in STEM, actually think that STEM is primarily for men. Also, role congruity theory, which is this idea that if you are raised to have a certain role in society, in this particular instance, gender roles are coming into play, but if you're raised to have a certain role and that runs counter to, for example, engaging in STEM, you're less likely to engage in it. In this particular way, girls are raised with more of a community orientation, and community-oriented individuals avoid STEM because they mostly perceive it as solo work. It's a stereotype about STEM. It's not one that fits reality, as we will be talking about on the panel with actual scientists. STEM is certainly not a solo endeavor most of the time. And then there are work-family challenges. While boys and girls, young men and young women do prioritize family, girls are raised to prioritize family more than boys. And so they grow up seeing STEM, both seeing STEM as family and flexible, but it's more important to girls, so they have to make choices given those priorities. And then there's gender discrimination. We know that once you are in a STEM field, that over the course of their lifetime, women in STEM, 50% or 48% experience some form of gender discrimination, and 36% or 1 in 3 experience some form of sexual harassment. And lastly, given all of this, girls who are good at math tend to be more likely to also be good at other things like languages than boys who are good at math. And I'll repeat that. So girls who are good at math are more likely to be good at other things than boys who are good at math. So if you have more options in front of you and you have all of these other messages going on, then you can see how you might make the choice to go into another field. So we did 2 studies, essentially. One is a content analysis of over 1,000 STEM characters in the top-rated television, film, TV shows, cables, film, and streaming content. We looked across platforms that people may be exposed to. And the way we did this is we started with a massive list of the top shows for 10 years, and then we identified the STEM characters using a variety of methods, and then we went in and we evaluated the STEM characters. We also did a survey, a nationally representative sample of almost 1,000 respondents with a 52% survey response rate, including girls, representative groups of girls in middle school, high school, and then young women ages 18 to 24 enrolled in college. So this gives us a really good sense of what girls and women, young women, are thinking about STEM. So how are STEM characters portrayed in media? I'm going to start with the negative portrayals. So I'll start with the bad news, and then I'll go into the good news. The negative portrayals, not too much of a surprise, but women are vastly underrepresented in STEM characters, as are people of color. And I should point out that women of color are underrepresented at about the same rate as white women, but across the board, women are underrepresented in STEM characters. Also, there are a lot of occupational stereotypes that are reinforced through the ways in which we portray women in STEM in entertainment media. Also, women face adversity, which we'll talk about, their characters, and they're shown as family inflexible. So I'm going to dig a little bit deeper into all 5 of these findings. The first, women are 51% of the population, but represent 37% of STEM characters. There's a massive gap. In terms of people of color, 38% of Americans identify as a person of color, but only 27.9% of characters working in STEM in entertainment media are people of color. In terms of reinforcing stereotypes, in the real world, just over half of STEM people in the life sciences are women. So women have actually achieved parity in the life sciences. What we see is an overrepresentation of women in working in life sciences as characters in entertainment media, but a vast underrepresentation in other fields such as computer occupations, engineering, and physical science, which sends and reinforces the message that there are certain types of STEM that are okay for girls and women, but not other types. Women also face adversity in STEM. They face it at the same rate as male characters, but what we find is that men are more likely to actually overcome the adversity over the course of whatever the narrative or plot line is. Also, even though women and female characters face a small amount of gender discrimination and harassment, 4%, they are about 4 times more likely to be shown experiencing this as male characters, which sends a message that that is something that you're going to encounter if you go into STEM. Also, 42.9% of characters were shown sacrificing their personal life, which sends a very clear message that you will not achieve a work-life balance if you go into a STEM occupation. So even though it is not the majority, that's an high number, right? Almost 43% of characters shown sacrificing their personal life. When it comes to positive portrayals in STEM, both men and women are shown as leaders at the same rates. I'll get to that data in a moment. There's gender equality of character traits, and also STEM work is generally shown as collaborative, which is a positive. So first off, in terms of leadership, we actually didn't find a difference. There is a big gap in the real world, but not a big gap in entertainment media, which really speaks to the power of entertainment media, right? These are worlds that we create. So we can create a world where you have men and women in STEM who are holding leadership rates at the same rate. There are no gender differences in characters in terms of empowerment and competence. And we actually found that more women were presented as highly intelligent, more female characters were presented as highly intelligent than male characters. STEM work also shown as collaborative. So 2/3 of characters were shown as engaging in collaborative rather than solo work. This is an important finding because it means that the bias or the perception that STEM work is solo work is not primarily coming from entertainment media. But let me complicate this. 1 in 3 characters is shown doing solo work, which is a very rare thing in reality. So it overrepresents solo work compared to the real world. So what do girls and women think about STEM? Now turning to our nationally representative survey, 1 in 3 girls have considered it, and young women have considered going into STEM, and 1 in 4 actually have made a plan to go into STEM. Factors that decrease STEM intention, we'll start with the bad news here first, seeing STEM work as solo rather than collaborative, and then perceiving that women in STEM will face sexism or discrimination. So on the first point, just to reiterate, 72.7% of girls and young women view STEM as being collaborative, but the 25 or approximately 1 in 4 who view it as being mostly solo are far less likely to want to go into STEM and have an intention to go into STEM. In terms of gender bias, almost half of girls and young women in our sample, again, which is nationally representative, say that they believe that women in STEM have to work harder. So they will face an environment that is not gender fair. In terms of factors that increase STEM, this is the kind of the bread and butter here. If we want to increase STEM, girls and women's participation in STEM, we need to look at these 8 factors, right? So seeing STEM as serving the community means that you're more likely to go into it. Seeing it as family flexible, knowing someone in STEM, having a role model in STEM, having teachers who encourage STEM, having friends and family who encourage STEM, and last and certainly not least, having a STEM role model in media. And I'll unpack these factors, some of them all together. So in terms of the percentage of girls who say they have this support. So remember the previous slide. These are important factors that increase your intention to go into STEM. So how are our girls and young women being supported? 30.9%, right? So 31%, only 1 in 3 have a STEM role model. Only 1 in 5 have friends who support them and encourage them to go into STEM. 40% say teachers encourage them, and 36.6% say family encourage them. These numbers are okay, but they could be much higher. In terms of media representations, 82.7 or 4 in 5 girls and women said that it is important to see women STEM characters in film and television. So who are the most influential characters? Of the girls and young women who said that they plan to go into STEM, so the 1 in 4 who actually say, yes, I'm going into STEM, we asked them, what characters inspired you? And these were the top 5. Our report actually goes a bit deeper, and we have additional characters who were inspiring to girls and women, one of whom happens to be here this evening. So make sure and check out the bigger report online. But as you can see, the one thing that all 5 of the top 5 characters, top 5 most influential characters have in common, anyone? Life sciences, right. These are all medical doctors. In terms of our recommendations, we have some media industry interventions, STEM industry interventions, some institutional interventions that cover not the 2 on the top, but educational institutions and other cultural institutions. And then last but not least, cultural interventions. So in terms of media industry interventions, this is an industry room, right? So this is the key point for this particular audience. Improve representation. So put more women, and especially women of color, into STEM characters, write them into your scripts, make them a part of your narrative, whether they're prominent or even secondary. As the story we heard earlier, just adding in a character who is unremarkably female, unremarkably a woman of color in a STEM position, and improve the ways in which girls and women are portrayed in STEM. In terms of STEM industry interventions, retaining women in STEM through equitable hiring, pay, and promotion practices, and especially by addressing workplace bias, sexual harassment, and gender discrimination in the workplace. Again, those numbers, 1 in 2 will experience gender discrimination, and 1 in 3 will experience sexual harassment in the industry. And then in terms of institutional interventions, making sure that we cultivate girls and young women's interests early on through role models, parents, educators, and mentors. And last but not least, cultural interventions. So early childhood interventions to combat stereotypes about science being a pursuit for men, and also cultural misconceptions that girls are not as capable of doing STEM. The most important research that has come out in the past decade is research obliterating the idea that somehow girls don't have the aptitude for STEM. In fact, we find just the opposite. We actually find that girls perform better both in high school and in college when it comes to STEM courses. So it is not a matter of capability. It is simply a matter of living in a culture that doesn't fully accept women as STEM participants, as STEM actors, as STEM agents, and we need to shift those perceptions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. So now we're going to bring this back around to all of you who are storytellers. We're going to have a panel, and I'm going to bring up my esteemed panelists. So first, I would love to have Nkechi Carroll, executive producer, showrunner, The American. I would love to have Jess Cramp, PhD candidate, James Cook University, executive director, Sharks. Who doesn't want that title? Candy Alexander, actor, CSI Miami, Scandal, many others. Chris Nee, creator, executive producer, Doc McStuffins, and Vampirina. And last but not least, Mika Abdallah, star of Project MC Squared. And so we don't have a lot of time, but essentially what we're going to do is kind of 2 rounds of questions. One is going to be about influences, what has influenced them, and their pathway to where they are today. And then the second round, we're going to get into STEM, because what I'd like to say is, of our 5 panelists, 4 of them were either acting or creating the characters that were named in our study. With Nkechi, she was a writer on Bones, and Temperance Brennan was one of the main characters. With Mika, she played the lead character, Michaela McAllister, in Project MC Squared. And with Chris Nee, of course, you'll hear the fabulous story of Dr. McStuffins. And with Candy Alexander, she was Alex Woods on CSI Miami. So out of that top list, we have 4 represented. So, and Katie, I'm going to start with you. So tell us how Buffy and Shakespeare inspired you.
I know, it's quite the pairing. I grew up sort of all over the world, and a good chunk of that time was spent in the UK. And while I was going to school there, I was acting a part of the Oxford Youth Theatre and sort of fell in love with Shakespeare. Now you have to understand, I come from a very traditional Nigerian family, so your career options are doctor, banker, lawyer. And here I was, and I was like, oh my God, Shakespeare's amazing. And look at the power of words. And I went and told my mom at 13 that I wanted to be a writer, and she laughed and walked out of the room. So I went into economics, like a good girl, but never sort of gave up the hope of like, I could touch people the way that Shakespeare had touched me. And it seems not at all related, but I promise you it is. It was watching Buffy while I was working at the Federal Reserve, and I know everyone's like, oh, teen show, and she killed demons, and woohoo! But if you really dug deep into what they were doing on that show, this was this amazing sort of blonde-haired teen girl who was saving the world in the most badass way. And the way that these sort of demons represented sort of bigger social issues and bigger issues that kids deal with in high school and everything. And I know it doesn't feel very Shakespearean, but to me, I was like, oh no, I see it in there. Just like I see it in General Hospital, which I still watch every day. Oh, it's there. And I remember being like, oh, this is the power of TV. This is what it can do. And so from that, sort of taught myself how to write for television, downloading Buffy scripts and, Shonda Grey's Anatomy scripts and pretty much everything Aaron Sorkin ever wrote. And taught myself how to write for TV so that I could affect that same kind of change in people. So.
And can you also talk a little bit about your point of view? She grew up on 4 continents, so she was consuming all kinds of media across the globe. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because there are a lot of differences.
Absolutely. I mean, I was born in the U.S. I was born in New York, moved back to Nigeria when I was very young, and then moved to the Côte d'Ivoire, and then went to boarding school in England. And so in any given year, I was on all 3 continents because we'd always come back. But the one thing that was sort of amazing was seeing media and the power of media in all those different countries and on all those different continents. And so I consumed an obscene amount of television growing up, probably more than my mother wanted me to. But I would be in the Ivory Coast, and we'd had, VHS tapes. Yes, VHS tapes. They existed, of like The Cosby Show and all these different shows that for me sort of helped me identify with a part of my life that I wasn't seeing as much because I wasn't living in the US at the time. And then I would go to England and I would see how their shows represented their culture, and I would see universally sort of what was done really well. And then also I would see the differences and be like, oh, we can do better at representing that in the States, or we could do better at representing that here in England, or why in some countries am I seeing more of people who look like me represented, and not just visually look like me, but also in terms of my interests. Like I loved economics and all that stuff, and it felt like in some media I was seeing more of that represented in others. And again, that was part of my motivating force of seeing how much media affected me growing up, that I could be sort of part of that change as an adult later. And here I am.
And here you are. So Jess has such a cool job. And can you tell us how Jacques Cousteau inspired you to go from Pennsylvania to the Cook Islands?
Yeah, unlike you, I grew up in Pennsylvania, never left the country until I could afford to do so on my own. Didn't really see the ocean, till I was 15 maybe. But I had this fabulous collection of Jacques Cousteau, the Ocean World of Jacques Cousteau books. And my grandmother used to give me the option of reading Reader's Digest or National Geographic. You choose. And so I had this fascination with exploration because I was in a small town. And yeah, I looked at this man, this old weird French man with a little red hat and his Speedos, and I was like, well, he doesn't exactly represent me, but I think I could do what he does. But then as life happens, I didn't have any role models or anyone showing me that route. How do I get there? How do I be him? What do I do? So the people around me, I had a cool orthopedic surgeon who let me take my cast off if I played my clarinet. So then I said, okay, well, maybe I want to be a physician. That seems hard. It seems challenging. It seems something that I could prove to people that I can do something more than just be this little girl from PA, right? And then I went down that route. I became a scientist. And then I turned 30, as you do when you're 30, like, what the fuck am I doing with my life, right? And I took a hard look in the mirror, and I was a cancer biologist at the time, super honorable, loved what I did, inside 15 hours a day, didn't love that part of it. Remembered that fire in my gut that I had had for the ocean, for exploration, for that weird man in the red hat. And I took a leap. And so I saved a bunch of money over a couple of years, and I quit my job. And I took off at 30 and said, okay, this is the life I want. These are the skills I need. So I'm going to go out and just systematically begin to gain those skills. And then I ended up on a sailboat across the Pacific. And I worked on a shark campaign using my scientific background to translate science to the people who least understand science, politicians. And we were fairly successful. We were able to create a sanctuary for sharks. And throughout that process, my science brain was constantly analyzing, saying, whoa, these facts are being twisted in a way that is a bit unacceptable. We don't have enough data. The politicians are constantly saying, sorry, I can't make that decision. You're making a great argument. The data doesn't say. The data doesn't show. And so I knew that I had a good scientific training, and I had finally found this sort of perfect match of my life intentions with my actions. And so now I use my science brain to research sharks, but I do very policy-specific shark research that supports policies that are then needed. So then I go and I harass or influence the politicians to make right decisions.
So one of the things I want Jess to talk a little bit about, she has overcome a lot of obstacles, as many of our other panelists have. And I love the story about guy went to pee and it gave her an opportunity too, but talk about the obstacles because they think she's just this dainty little thing, and, just talk a little bit about that because it's hard work.
Yeah, so the first mistake was he's like, oh, you're so cute. What are you doing on this boat with us? I was like, all right, it's on. But I was on a fishing boat for, so a lot of the work I do, I work on sharks that are commercially fished. So that means I'm going out to sea where you could throw me overboard and no one would ever know. My mom would miss me. But so I went out to sea on a commercial longline vessel. They are old, they are decrepit. They have lines that are 30 miles long. The guys work around the clock. There are very, very few women in this field. There are very few men who even want to do the job. But I was like, please let me on. I need to see what sharks are caught. So while I was on the boat, the guys didn't want me to lift anything. They didn't want me to touch anything. And, everyone was telling me I was going to get raped on this boat and it was going to be horrendous. But I mean, in reality, the men were fantastic and they were going out of their way to try to ensure that I was safe. But in doing so, they were just belittling my intelligence and my strength at every turn. And on the longline vessel, it's like a factory line. So there are clips that you have to, they have a line that's about 2 meters long, 6 feet long, has a hook at the end and bait. And so 30 miles of line, and every 5 feet, there's another clip and another clip and another clip. And these get put out over the course of 6 hours. And someone is physically doing that by hand. And my hands aren't so big or strong. But the guys were like, you can't do it. And I was like, okay. So then one of the guys had to pee, and I just jumped in his spot in the line. And yes, I had to use 2 hands to do the clips, but I just made sure that I was as fast as they were. And from that moment, in order for them to respect me, I had to prove it and earn it. But from that moment, then all of a sudden they were very excited about the work I was doing. And they were asking me to give them a break. And I've always been one, and I'm sure everyone in the room, like you've had adversity come up, and instead of complain about it, you just step up, you know? But that was probably for me kind of a proud moment. Just like, well, my hands might be little, but I can do this work, mofo. Like, I hang out with a lot of fishermen. I apologize for my language.
Yeah. So,
And in the writer's room.
so speaking of, being on the high seas, overcoming obstacles, many of you know Chris Nee as being, the ultimate kids creator, but tell us a little bit about your how does Sesame Street and Deadliest Catch fit into your life
Into
story?
it all?
Yeah.
I can swear like a sailor too. Disney will be super psyched about that one. But it's true. I've been out on the high seas and I know what that world is. I was very motivated in my life by truly growing up feeling like an absolute outsider. I grew up gay in the 80s. I came out living in Greenwich, Connecticut in 1987. Nobody was out. Elton John wasn't out then. Really. So I really, really knew what it was like to not see myself on screen. The first time I ever saw a representation that looked anything like me was Cher in Silkwood, which is really not that's not an uplifting story right there. I grew up very aware of what it was to know how much you feel separated and how much you don't dream for yourself in so many ways when you are not seeing yourself as included in the larger community. Like most people in kids TV, I have a lot of sort of fucked up shit in my past that I'm trying to work out. And I really do think those are the best kids writers. Like I am not writing for kids. I am writing for myself, ultimately. And I'm writing about community and I'm writing about inclusion. And of course, at the time that Doc McStuffins came around, I was writing it for my son, who is a white boy. And it never occurred to me that it would be a problem to change the gender or the race of who that character was. When Disney first said to me, I made the character into a girl because I didn't want another boy leading a pack. Like, we just didn't need that. And it was still for him. It didn't occur to me he wouldn't watch that show. And when Disney first came to me and said, how would you feel about the character being African-American? For me, I still couldn't tell the story of my family at that point. So again, I knew how important that representation would be. And it was an easy yes for me, because I believe so much that there are so many ways in which we get knocked sideways off of our path to greatness in life. And if we are not seeing ourselves, if we don't see the path to where we want to go, it is the classic, if you don't see it, you can't be it. I mean, I remember wanting to go into animation and actually looking and watching credits to see if I could find women's name. So there it is. There's the moment where I was a young woman and thinking I wanted to do this, and were there other women doing it? And I could find very, very few. And thank God I'm the kind of person who will go through that gate and say, I'm still going to go do it. I feel incredibly bad that with a name like Chris Nee, the only thing I'm representing is an Asian man. And I'm incredibly sorry that people look at my shows. I was actually hired on a Disney show for 2 seasons because they needed an Asian male perspective. And we just went with it. But I know how much we need those representations. I know how deep and dark it can feel to not see yourself. And to be honest, I still don't see a lot of myself on screen. So it's still out there. It's still important. So I feel a great responsibility to represent anyone I feel I can. And that's the joy of telling a great story. Like, it has to start with a great story. Always. Like, it can't be the issue first. Doc McStuffins works because every kid wants to talk to their toys and have their toys talk back, not because of all the other amazing things I got to do with it. So that's where the storytellers come in. We need the best storytellers to then start sticking in all the stuff you care about.
If I may, very quickly, one of the biggest honors for me tonight is meeting Chris and sitting next to her. And I told her this when she walked in, but Doc McStuffins has probably been the show that affected my family's life the most. And not just because I'm raising 2 Black boys in America who saw this Black woman, little girl who's this doctor and it's amazing and everything, but also they did one of the most fantastic adoption storylines, which represents my family because my oldest son is my birth son and my youngest son is adopted through the foster care system. And I could sit them down and we could watch Doc McStuffins and it's like, look, that's us. And it helped me explain what our blended family looked like. And so, Chris, it is an honor. And thank you for what you do because it literally affected my family's life.
Bravo.
I will tell you, I think I can speak for most of the people here, maybe all the people here. These are tough times. And it is a great joy to go to work and feel like you have purpose. And we all have so much influence. Oh my God, we have so much influence. My shows are seen, each of my shows is seen by 100 million people around the world, individual viewers, every quarter. I have so much influence over young children, which is how we start this. But we all do. Everyone who's in this room, you're already there. Give yourself the joy of going to bed at night and knowing what we can't stop certain things going on in this country, but you can lay the groundwork for the future, and it feels empowering. So do it for yourself, let alone for everybody else.
Bravo. So, speaking of starting young, I'm going to turn to Mika because, and when you talk about being a little bit on the outside, and her parents are here and really encouraged her, but I mean, you started at 6, and I know you loved Mulan, but can you just talk about, from your perspective, how you got into acting and what you've experienced?
Okay. So getting into acting wasn't actually my idea. It was my mom's, but not in that kind of way. I was really, 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 really shy when I was younger, and it's okay. And I would refuse to talk to anyone, let alone big crowds of people. And so my mom was kind of just looking for ways to get me out of my shell and get me in front of people, and she sent me on a couple little auditions for little local magazines and stuff, and then I fell in love with it. But it was Mulan that I think originally inspired me, because I did start so young. I didn't have time to, watch Grey's Anatomy and Scandal and whatnot. So I had the Disney movies. I had the little Disney animated princess movies, and I think I fell in love with Mulan because my parents had always kind of raised me with this idea that I don't need a boy to come by and save the day. I don't have to be a boy to do anything great. And Mulan was one of the only Disney princesses at the time that I thought really represented that same idea that my parents had been raising me with from the very beginning. And so I think that is what kind of inspired my view of the media and entertainment in general, and that there is a much larger impact than you think there is in a little Disney film or in a, in children's programs. And so then whenever I was on MC Squared, I just did, I want to say 7 seasons over the course of 3 years of a show called Project MC Squared, and it shows 6 women who are in STEM and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math, teaming together to save their little town of Maywood Glen and all of the world, of course. And, that being my first kind of major project to be a part of has just been really, thrilling to see how these little 6-year-old girls are coming up to me now, in my DMs. I'm getting DM'd by 6-year-old girls telling me how I've inspired them to partake in the science fair. And God, we did this, I'm sorry, I'm like all over the place, but God, we did this whole little day camp thing at the Netflix headquarters with all of the Girl Scouts that had won these competitions around the state of California. And it was me and my co-stars were all about the same age. And these, 6 to 12-year-old little girls were teaching us stuff about science and math and engineering that we had no idea. And we did all these little experiments, and it was just so amazing to see how us portraying these characters really struck a chord with some girls, and especially our individual characters, because we're also there's a lot of there's a lot of like representation on our show. We have me. I'm really the only white girl on our show. We have, there's a Asian girl, there's an African American girl, there's a girl that's supposed to be from Brazil. And so it was really amazing to see that not only did these girls identify with what our characters were passionate about, but then could also identify with, well, that girl looks like me and she's doing exactly what I want to be doing. She's a tech wizard and she looks just like me. And I love it.
Bravo. Thank you. And so another one of our extremely iconic characters has been Alex Woods, CSI Miami, played by the fabulous Candy Alexander. But if we go way back when, I mean, you grew up in the business and her mom was an opera singer, but tell us how Anne Margaret inspired you, of all people.
Well, I grew up in New York, and on Saturday afternoons, they had something called the $1 Million Movie, and that's when you actually saw a movie. And I don't remember how old I was, but I just remember seeing Bye Bye Birdie. And I saw her shimmying like that. I was like, well, I'm going to do that. And I love Anne Margaret. And I had seen a lot of Broadway and a lot of theater, but she just had something that was amazing. And also at that time, a lot of Black people weren't on TV, so it wasn't as if I was looking, it was unheard of to think that someone would look like me. So it was more of a feeling, an energy, it was like, oh no, that's my tribe, so it transcended race.
And did you think at that time, dance, theater, was that more welcoming? Was there more diversity versus, and then of course you went into film and TV, but I'm just wondering as a pathway for those in the audience who may be artists like yourself, was that a better pathway into the business?
It was a type of thing, to be honest, where I thought first, my mother thought I just had too much energy. So she needed me to go somewhere. So ballet class was good. It's like, you'll be there all day, go. So it kind of happened, and then as I got into it, I just remember always seeing at least one Black girl in the chorus of every single show on Broadway. There was never a time, to me, I mean, they might have been a couple of things, but I always saw one. So I always knew, oh, okay, I'll have consistent work.
The confidence that you're the one.
I knew I was the one. I was like, oh no, I'm Aunt Margaret. They're going to open the door for me. So,
And so you have. And so you have. Yeah. So I'm going to move into now STEM. And I'm going to move back to Nkechi, because what's amazing is when we were diving into her bio, not only did you work on Bones, but you worked on Rosewood, you worked on The Resident. You've had a whole lot of STEM going on. So I'd love for you to talk about some of those characters and stories, because you've had some really interesting encounters with people, and it's also about being authentic. So I'd love for you to tell us some of those stories.
Absolutely. Part of it was, again, Nigerian mom, doctor, banker, lawyer. I was never going to be the doctor or the lawyer, but I was like, oh, I can get as close to doctor as possible by portraying these women on TV and be like, Mom, look, this is as close as we're getting to science. But I was extremely lucky. I mean, I have a math background, I have an economics background, and I was working at the Federal Reserve when I got hired on my first show, which was by Hart Hansen, and it was the Bone spinoff, The Finder. And coming up under Hart, I mean, we had these female characters, and I would love to take credit for creating them or deepening them when I got there. But the truth is, I walked into an environment where they made it very clear that these are who these women are. It is very important that we portray them authentically. and because we have a responsibility to do so, and frankly, because it makes for really good, interesting TV. And so that was how I was brought up in the industry, and that was how sort of I was raised as a writer and as a producer. And so, Temperance Brennan, iconic. I mean, Emily Deschanel played her beautifully. And she was the lead of our show, and honestly was the way the cases were solved. But what was great was our general rule was if it's happened one time in the world somewhere, we can do it on the show. We were not allowed to make up the science. It was very important that Brennan solved that case in a legitimate way, that a forensic anthropologist would solve that case. It was very important to us. And so the incredible amount of research and consultants we worked with, and Kathy Reichs, who wrote the books that Bones was inspired by, and it was her career as a forensic anthropologist that inspired the Brennan character. I mean, we worked very closely with her and other consultants to make sure we were representing these characters authentically. And at the time, for me, it was just really great, interesting work. And it wasn't until I went back to my alma mater, sort of halfway through my tenure on Bones, I was back at University of Pennsylvania for an alumni event, and this young freshman ran up to me, and somehow she'd found out from someone that I worked on Bones, and she's like, "I'm here studying forensic anthropology because of your show." And I was like that, and she was so lit up and so excited. And she was like, it's not just me, there's a bunch of my friends. And then over time, I would get emails and letters and more girls telling me, I'm studying forensic anthropology because of Temperance Brennan. Talk about the power of media. Like, that was amazing. And so then I started in the jobs I had after that, looking for females in those kind of roles that can make a difference, for characters of color in those type of roles that could make a difference, because I really understood the power of it. And, I was telling you on the phone with, on one of the shows I was on, it was very early in in fact, it was the second episode, I think, and I was given the script by the showrunner, and he's like, whatever notes you have, I was his number 2. And I read the script, and I was like, and we had these female characters in really great sort of STEM roles and really empowered female characters. But in that particular episode, for whatever reason, they didn't feel very empowered. And I was like, oh, here we go. And I'm going to have this conversation. I'm going to have to fight the fight. And I literally was like, I just think like we've got them in these great roles, but the men are sort of driving the decision making that these women are doing. And he turned around and walked out of my office. And I was like, where are you going? And he's like, well, when a really smart, intelligent woman on my show tells me that the females aren't empowered, I go fix it. And literally walked out of the room and did a rewrite on the script. And I was just like, okay, this is why I'm here. This is why I'm in the room. They've unleashed the beast.
Sorry, economics.
And so, yeah, I continued to do the same, and it was the same on The Resident. One of the characters I'm most proud of on that show is the character played by Shawnette. It's Dr. Mina Okafor, not just because she's Nigerian, yay Nigeria, but she's also probably one of the baddest doctors on the planet. And again, authenticity, making sure we're representing, she's not doing magic in the operating room that a real doctor wouldn't be able to do, but really authentically portraying you can be this dynamic, amazing female with a love life, with all of this stuff, and also be the top of your game and be kicking butt and making a difference the way she does on that show. And yeah, that's...
And I asked her, I said, well, her mom is actually a doctor. So I thought, okay, finally, a Nigerian doctor, not in real life, but in the show. Right. Did your mom ever give you notes?
No notes from my mom. She was, it was more sort of, I inspired a lot of sort of like the conversations that our character had with her parents, just about sort of immigrant life and being here and sort of pursuing stuff. And then my mom would be like, oh, I remember us having that conversation. I'm like, yeah, and this is what I wish I'd said to you in that moment. Yeah. She's saying it on the screen. So yes, we worked out a lot of our stuff that way.
Yeah. So in terms of keeping it real, I'm going to move back to Jess. And so
real life STEM character.
So what do you think about media portrayals of marine biologists and sharks and bikinis and all of that? So how has that helped your career?
I'm so rich right now. Well, I mean, I can start by stating the obvious. I have blonde hair and I have blue eyes and I'm short and I'm small and I study sharks, and that is all by accident. And there is this growing movement of women that have a similar demographic to me, that like to post photos of themselves in bikinis and riding sharks and calling themselves scientists. And it is fairly detrimental to the work that I actually do, because while I live on a tiny Pacific island, these politicians see these images. The young girls down there see these images. The portrayal of women marine biologists is only wearing bikinis. Or, I mean, if I'm really honest, how many of you in the room think that and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but how many of you in the room think that I swim with sharks? Raise your hand. That I swim with sharks as a job. Yeah. So I think that with marine biology, there's both a hypersexualization, but also like strong stereotypes about what that means. And the way that I look and the way that I talk and where I'm from, feel myself constantly battling that we shouldn't look at what someone looks like, but how about just for a minute, close your eyes and hear what I'm saying? Or close your eyes and imagine this Pacific Islander doing this job. So yeah, I feel like I battle that personally, but then I take the fight on for all the girls that I'm surrounded by all the time in the Pacific, and it's tough.
But you've had a positive impact. So talk about your influence on other girls, specifically the Pacific Islanders that you're around, and you have had a direct impact. Can you talk about some of those stories?
Thank you for that. It is extremely important to me to share what I do with all of the kids in the communities I work in. So I've chosen to live in a country called the Cook Islands. For anyone that doesn't know, it's a Polynesian nation that is next door. It's just to the west of French Polynesia, where Tahiti is. And there are very, very, very few women in any science career. It's doctor, lawyer, and tourism. And so for girls, and it doesn't matter what color I am down there, even though I am extremely sensitive to that, but for girls to see any woman doing this kind of work is a really big deal to them. And so I feel a very, very strong, I feel compelled and honored to actually include girls in the work that I do. So every time, I work on a number of different islands, and every time I go in the field, I ensure that I have a female local research assistant with me. And I ensure that all the boys know it. But I include equal numbers of boys and girls, because I'm not excluding boys, because they need just as much inspiration as the girls do. But I've had 4 girls from the Cook Islands go off and study marine biology, which for me is probably like, yeah. And a couple of young women, lots of young women email me on Instagram. That is pretty common. I think anytime, Instagram looks amazing, looks like you're always doing all this cool stuff. They don't see me staring at my computer going cross-eyed. But even I've had Pacific Islanders from the Solomon Islands or from Palau or from somewhere else saying, hey, I love what you're doing. Thank you. Please, keep being badass. Keep showing our men that these women can do it. So it doesn't even matter what color I am down there or what accent I have or what color my hair is. It just matters that I'm there and including the girls and showing them that they can, and telling their parents that they can as well.
Well, hopefully we'll have a whole different image of marine biologists over the next decade. So moving down the line in terms of keeping it real, so Candy, you had the opportunity from your experience on ER, and you brought that to the Alex Woods character. So in terms of kind of keeping it real and also the impact that you didn't even realize you had, I'd love for you to just, talk about that. And then Chris and Mika, I'd love for you to talk about the impact of Doc McStuffins, also the impact of Michaela, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A.
I'm going to be on Dr. McStuff.
Oh, yeah. I've already cast Geena, so you're next.
Yeah.
Okay. Alex, I didn't know, and this is the truth, I didn't know until I left CSI Miami. I did my 7 to 8 years. And then, as an actress, I start wanting to spread my wings. So I asked Ann Donahue to be okay. And I went off and did a different show in a different town and really honestly just moved on. And this group of women, they kind of adopted me. They kind of took me under their wing and, You know, they would cook for me because I was too skinny.
This was in New Orleans?
This is in New Orleans. They would cook for me constantly and just really took care of me. And once I was really comfortable with them, because they would invite me to their home where they would cook, they waited until I was comfortable. And then the oldest woman, who I think was probably in her late 70s, she said, "Why would you leave that show? You played a doctor, a character we could look up to. My granddaughter looked up to you. Why would you leave that show?" Yes, and here I am going, wait, what? Don't show with my friends, okay? And I just said, well, you know, I'm an actress. There are things I need to do. And they were just like, really? Because we're trying to raise kids. And now you're playing a rape victim, alcoholic, and that's nice and everything, but we need role models. And that was when it hit me. I honestly just was in my bubble. I was honestly in my bubble. Didn't see it coming.
And you were surprised to hear that that character was cited in our study.
I
as
had
well.
I did. I thought Madeline's kidding me. They just come in to save me. They're like, let's go get her. Yeah, I'm very surprised. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. We've got to get you back to Bentonville.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So one of the wonderful things about Chris and Doc McStuffins is the impact that you, the characters, had. And I remember this great article about all these African-American female doctors who kind of put, I don't know, what did they put, like an Instagram together? Or?
Yeah, they had created a collage right as the show came out, and less than 2% of physicians are African American women, and we know that that patients do better when they see someone who, as a doctor, who represents them, and these women started putting up photos of themselves called and they created a collage called "We Are Doc McStuffins," and it started with about 10 women, and then it was 20, and then it was 100, and then they needed help because they couldn't figure out how to put them all onto one sheet. And they actually started communicating because of that, and I'm still very much in touch with this group of women, Maisha Taylor and the Artemis Medical Foundation, which is now the first medical foundation for female physicians. There are about 3,000 members, and they also work very hard to identify girls who are potentially looking to get into the medical career starting in high school. And for them, you know, very often they might be the only person in their residency, and so they now have a peer-to-peer network through that process. So that was one of the many things. I think Doc, one of the interesting things about Doc is that women would come up to me and have tears in their eyes about the representation, and you realized they were telling me that it was for their daughter, but it really was, they were experiencing their own wounds of not having seen themselves. But, you know, again, in terms of Doc is one of those really clear stories where you can say how much influence we have. You know, there's a story from very early on, 6 months into the show being on the air, an African-American female physician watching the show with her young son, who was about 2 years old, 3 years old. And he turned to her at one point and said, "Mom, can boys be doctors too?" You know, maybe someday, maybe. And you know, I was at the White House and spoke to someone who worked on Obama's staff who was in the Surgeon General's office, and she said there was a before Doc McStuffins and an after. Before we were assumed to be nurses, and afterwards people knew that we were doctors. And Forbes recently had a study that showed that girls 6 to 9, now the number one thing they want to be when they grow up is a doctor. And one can only, I mean, I hate to joke, but because you can't make that, but you kind of can't think of anything else. Look, I have a medical alert tag, I don't have it on right now, that says I created Doc McStuffins, because the one thing I hope to get out of this is being taken very well care of in a hospital. And I do think we can expect that we are about 10 years away from the first graduating class that's going to be the Doc McStuffins class of medical school. And I think it's a real thing, and I think it's going to be a real thing. So I'm, I have a staff writer who is undergoing chemotherapy right now, and the first thing we did was made her a T-shirt that said "I write for Doc McStuffins," and I was like, "That's what you do. You want to be in that world. Show them where you are." So yeah, we can make just incredible. I mean, that thing about 6 months in, this kid who was young, and again, kids are such an empty vessel, who didn't know that men could be doctors. It's a Copernican revolution in thought. That was quite a few syllables, I just want to point out. And that's the influence we have, especially with kids. I have to say, especially with kids, you can come in and start fresh, and put in the values that I hope politically in 10 years we have a Doc McStuffins generation as well, and not just in medical school. But so we have so much opportunity. Everyone in this room should be using it.
Absolutely. And speaking of opportunity and impact, Mika, were you surprised by the impact that your character had on girls, and from when you started to now, and now you're 18, and globally too, not just in the US? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, globally, I think, I'm sorry. My allergies are really bad. Globally has been, or our effect on girls globally has been the most incredible thing to hear about, because that's, again, one of the things that we had no idea was going to happen going into this. I think it was after our first season had premiered, and us girls, we're all friends, and we'd be hanging out with the producers and the writers and whatever, and we heard that we were actually not most popular in the US, but I believe it was India that we were the most popular in, and second was maybe Italy, and third, the United States was very far back on the list and how popular we are. And that was insane to think about, because the response that we've gotten from girls in the US has been extensive. And so to think that there are so many other girls in so many other countries that we are impacting is just wild. And I think the greatest thing about it is, yes, things aren't great here, but it's definitely talked about. It's very rare that you meet someone who has never heard of, people bringing to our attention, representation of women in the media. Whereas in a lot of the countries that we have heard that we have a huge impact on young girls, they may not get the same constant reinforcement. They may not be hearing it as frequently from their parents or from the news or from their teachers that this is a problem, or that they can be scientists, they can do this, they can do that. And so it's something that really fascinates me, that the media is truly one of the biggest forms of, I'm trying to think of the word, but it's the greatest way to reach young people, because young girls aren't going to always listen to what their parents say, or they're not always going to listen to what their teachers say is cool. But if there are 4, 5, 6 also young girls that they can look up to in a TV show that are saying, hey, no, like, I'm a scientist, no, I'm an engineer, then they're gonna listen to us, I think.
I think so. And hopefully we'll change the world tonight. Jasmine, do we have time for some questions? Okay, right there. Right there.
My name is Cheryl, and I live in Belgium and have a 12-year-old daughter. Actually, they're a set of twins, a girl and a boy, so I have a social experiment going on. And they very much wanted to meet you tonight, so I'll have to steal an autograph later. But I wanted to reinforce that, how much impact you all have all over the world. And I've got kind of a 3-pronged question, so pick whichever part is the most interesting. But first, Netflix and how we're able to tell other stories, kind of the democratization of the media. being able to watch E equals MC squared from Belgium, for example. What that's meant in terms of how you're thinking about your characters and your impact. Also, maybe this is one for the Geena Davis Institute and Lyda Hill. How much can we stop talking about the anecdotal impact and understanding? Because I actually gave one of the first TEDx talks, I think, on girls in STEM. I called it Girls Are Going to Save the World back in 2012. And I used the Geena Davis statistics. And then I quoted some research done at the Northern Oslo University where they talked about the CSI effect. So you are actually documented, and we need more of that documentation. So I'm wondering if there's a plan for that, you know, more work around that. I also am curious about our understanding of how American women are seen by the rest of the world and through Hollywood. And I guess I just want to thank you all for changing that image in every way that you're doing it.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, the purpose of tonight is to really kick off this next year of advocacy, and it wouldn't be possible in the way that we're going to scale it up without Lyda Hill and her foundation. So, and we have, not only is there CSI effect, but 21st Century Fox, Caroline did a huge Scully effect. So we are statistically backing up a lot of these examples. So that's just definitely what we're going to do. But with the help of Lyda Hill and her foundation, we're going to scale it in a really big way. So I think we have one, Jasmine, one more. Yes.
So, do I need a mic? Excuse my reach. Sorry. So it sounds like your experiences, from what we're hearing, have been very positive, and you've been all supported in the executive level to do the things that you want to do and tell the stories you want to tell. And I'd be interested in hearing from any one of you if there was a time when there was something that was considered radical by somebody who...
My family.
Or, well, no, I was going to say radical by an executive who maybe didn't see it your way. And if so, how did you handle that? And what was the outcome? Anybody? I know it can't be all bunnies and roses every day, you guys. I'm just wondering the flip side of that.
I mean, I could tell you a note that I would get constantly, almost universally on every show I wrote on. And it was whenever one of the female characters, even if they were in STEM and had these amazing jobs and were ruling the day, whenever they were assertive, it was careful they're not coming off too angry or careful. I mean, it's a constant. And finally, I was like, listen, you want to see angry, keep giving me that note. I'm like, when the male character on the show does it, he's not angry. He's passionate about solving the case, or he's passionate about it. So I said, I'm going to need you guys to trust us that they're not coming across as angry. They're coming across as empowered and passionate about their job. But I'll give them the note, and then I go on set and be like, don't change a thing you're doing. And you just, and they would be like, oh, thank you so much for hearing us. And I'd be like, of course. And you move on. You just got to fight the fight.
I was going to say,
some of the power is in making them think they were heard, and then you keep fighting the fight.
We all know what the status quo is. So clearly, anyone up here who is celebrating their success fought to do so. There is no one who started at women in strong positions, African-American characters, girls, like that is not where any of us is starting. We're starting behind that. So anyone sitting here who's made and affected great change, absolutely, and it doesn't mean that every single time it's a heated fight. It's not that thing. It's just constantly pushing your point of view and also learning your craft well enough to be good enough to get the opportunity. I mean, that is it. We're all here because we're elite. We are in the Writers Guild. If you're in the Writers Guild, you already have your foot in the door. Get good enough that you can then push your agenda. I mean, you know, that's my whole takeaway. It's the same sort of thing that I say about, like, it has to start with a great story. It doesn't start with your agenda. When people come up to me and say, like, I have a great show about, and it's just it's an issue. That's not the show that's going to change the world. The show that's going to change the world is the show that works on every other level, that you then are in there going, yes, and now I have the right to push the things that matter to me in this world, because that's actually why we're on the planet, is to try to make it a better thing. It's not, hopefully for most people, just to put fluff in the world. It can't be. It just can't be. And it can't be anymore. If you were doing that before, change it now. We have to do better. I will say one last thing, which is I think we all know about unconscious bias, and my new thing that I'm really pushing is conscious advocacy. And it is an absolute step beyond recognizing your unconscious bias. And Geena did a lot to change this for me. I early on, at the very, very early stuff that I read from her, started doing, I make my shows, run reports every 3 months. I look at every single background character together. I look at their eye color. I look at their body shapes. And sometimes we start to veer off. It happens. You can be amazed when you look at your own writing and realize that you're not quite there. And so it is conscious advocacy. We must all do it. This is the moment for us all to kind of wake up and realize you can't sit back and not get on a side right now. Get out there with your work and change things, because you can.
Bravo. So we can continue the conversation at the reception, but we need your help. And we're going to send you a survey. We're going to ask you for your help. We're going to ask you what are things you can change. We are here to come to your offices. We're here to meet with you. So please let us know if we can come in and present, give you some ideas. We can bring our scientists, with us, but please fill out the survey and let's continue the conversation at the reception. Thank you so much. And Kate, Andy, Chris, Mika, thank you.